So, Sean, we've been talking about local and international defence budgets as actually quite an interesting factor of peacetime and wartime. Post Second World War, defence budgets were very high for obvious reasons. That settled down. The Cold War, they were higher than what they are now. We then entered what we thought was, long-term peace. The war with Ukraine and Russia, and now Israel and Palestine and Gaza and so on has erupted. Suddenly our defence budgets come into sharp focus. So two questions for you. What are the budgets now and what's the politics behind them? And the second one is, given we've shrunk everything, is it that easy, even if you push up the budget, is it that easy to, as quick, equip yourself to put yourself on a reasonably defensive footing, just in case?
Yeah, so those two questions we could talk, well, there'd be a lot of wine on the table to address that one. I think it's going to be a theme we're going to look at for several weeks. We've got a few guests, haven't we, lined up, some political guests, because actually part of this is trying to get underneath this debate, because the debate keeps becoming, is 2% of our GDP, which is the minimum required for NATO, enough? And actually, there's been a recent House of Commons Defence Committee report that said that we're too reliant on our allies, that we are not able to defend ourselves properly. What's interesting about that is actually being a member of NATO is a fundamental pillar of our defence strategy, but 11 of the 32 countries pay their way, pay 2%, the rest do not. Is that right? Why should we pay more money when others are not? Really key point. But I think what, for me, the other factor is Margaret Thatcher's day, Cold War, 4% was our GDP we spent on defence. Cold War dividend, peace dividend, whatever you want to call it, we've now halved the amount we spend on defence. And I got some statistics out. In 1990, the British Army was 153,000. Now it's 73,000. It's less than half its size. The Navy had 138 ships and 38 submarines and 65,500 people. Now it's got 68 ships, which includes 10 submarines, a fraction of its size, and it's only got 32,000 people. So again, less than half its size. The Royal Air Force was 93,000. It's now 31,000, a third of its size. And it had 30 frontline fast jet squadrons. It's now got 7, a quarter of its size. Now, I will be the first to argue that technology means that you are much more capable, you get much more bang for your buck out of a Typhoon than you ever did out of a Jaguar or a Harrier of my day. But quantity also has a quality of its own. And the worry is, overlaid on all of that, we're spending half the amount of money than we were out of our GDP. Now you look at, out of that defence budget, we now put nuclear in there. Now, it normally costs about 6% of the defence budget. But in these next few years, we're replacing our nuclear submarines. We're replacing our nuclear warheads. That capital cost, there's been a massive debate on whether that should be part of the defence budget or something separate. Because that's a 40 billion slug of money. It's almost a full year's defence budget that's got to come out. There's no more money being put in. As a result, what's going to happen is that the amount of money available within the defence budget is going to shrink even further to accommodate that.
Yeah.
So it's going to make us even tighter financially at a time when Grant Shapps says, this is a really dangerous world. We should be spending more money on defence.
Yeah.
All of those things have come together, and it doesn't feel we're having a proper national debate about how much money we should be spending on defence. And my final point of that, we had a budget only a few days ago. In that budget, despite the rhetoric about spending more money on defence, despite the wars in Ukraine, despite the Houthis attacking, despite Hezbollah, despite Hamas, zero extra money to defence. The government prioritised tax cuts and childcare over defence.
And the reason for that is they don't actually think there's any votes in defence budgets, because people don't they don't actually understand what it entails. And as we know, the number one objective of any politician is to get re-elected. And if there's no votes in defence, then it goes off the radar.
But it's such an important issue. And as an ex-military guy, we used to study our military history, and we're never ready for the wars that come around the corner. yet it feels like it is a dangerous world. And I think we're really keen to understand from our viewers' perspective, what do you think? Do you think 2% is enough? Do you think we should be spending more money on defence?
Well, it's your money.
It's your money. And where would you take it from? How would we create the overhead to be able to do that? Or are we going to risk sleepwalking into not being prepared for the next war? It's a really big issue, and we need to explore that.
Well, and it's not just the amount, but as you pretty strongly implied earlier, it's actually what you spend it on. Because if you're going to spend it on conventional weapons, they take 20 years to wind up. So new tech, smarter ways of actually creating defence capability, which we are seeing, laser beams, drone, all sorts of other things. That's clearly going to be a massive part of our future.
I think there's a couple of other things that I think I'd like to explore. One of them is that the war in Ukraine has shown how technology, particularly around drones, has moved so dramatically quickly. Now, that is not what the military is generally good at in procurement. You've been involved in procurement a long time. Does it do it fast or does it do it slow?
Sorry, what was the question?
Glacially slow is normally. That does not fit comfortably. How do we change the way that we procure, particularly around that agility? And the other thing, we spend a fortune in live training, and yet simulators, network simulators, provide a really interesting way.
Yeah.
I've died many times in a simulator to stop me having to die for real. And there's a much better way of doing training, not just nationally, but internationally as part of alliances, much more cost effective, much more capable operational training. And yet there's some really simple blockers to making it happen. We need to explore those topics, and we're going to do that over the coming weeks.
Yeah, and I think there should be more of a national debate on the subject, actually.
Absolutely right.
So it's a very good point, Sean. So, Sean, we're going to have a very, very special, important guest this afternoon. Wasn't to be today, but hopefully will be soon.
Yeah, and a personal message to Colin Bell, Flight Lieutenant Colin Bell, Distinguished Flying Cross, had his 103rd birthday just the other day. He was going to be our special guest today. I was told yesterday that he'd had an abscess under one of his teeth, and he's had to have one of his teeth removed. Not much fun when you're young and fit. Even less fun when you're 103 years old. We understand he's recovering fine. We wish him every best with the recovery. But he's promised he will come to us, and we're hoping to get that interview to you very shortly. But for now, our very best wishes to Colin for a full recovery, and our thoughts are with you, mate.